The history of American football is a little sketchy, but it seems to have started in medieval Europe with a game called mob football, also known as folk football or Shove-type football. The game was played with an inflated pig's bladder filled with dried beans to give it some weight. During holidays and festivals, the game was played between two neighboring towns. The two sides had unlimited players, and to score a point you had to touch the ball to a designated spot. Sometimes the goal was to kick the ball into the balcony of the opposing team's church. The play area was informal and very large, sometimes miles. There wasn't very many rules. The only real rule is don't kill anyone. And even still, a lot of people couldn't handle that. Other than that, the players could do whatever it took to get the ball to the opposing goal. Shoving, kicking, tackling, punching, all legal in these early games. Games like these are referenced as early as the 9th century. Much like modern sports, tempers would flare and cause fights. In the early days, fights meant knives were drawn and someone was left dead on the pitch. Over the years, the rules of the game began to develop and 3 distinct games emerged: handball, football, and hockey. We know this because King Edward III of England banned all 3 games in 1363. Football and other ball games often got banned, but then the ban was soon lifted or forgotten. The obvious reason for the frequent bans are because the games were violent and often played on public streets, causing a nuisance. These games were very regional. Each area had their own rules and style of play. Over time, games began to get more formalized, with games being played on official fields. We don't have a lot of knowledge about most of the different variations, but there are a few that we do know a lot about. Calcio Florentino, or Florentine kick, was a more formalized version of mob football played in Florence. Players can throw or kick the ball as they wish. The game is full contact, with tackling, punching, and kicking all legal. It's interesting to note that the game was mainly played by rich aristocrats, even popes. People stopped playing the game in the early 1600s, but it was revived in 1930 by Benito Mussolini, of all people, looking to revive the fighting spirit of Italy. Variations of mob football have always been associated with aristocrats and universities. I suspect this is because such people have time to play games and can risk injury. You can imagine that such games lead to a great deal of debilitating injuries, and if you are a farmer or a laborer, you can't afford to take time off to nurse a broken arm. American football was, and still is, closely associated with universities. When American football began, it was only played at universities. The rest of the country played baseball. This is because American football grew out of mob football that was mostly played in boys' public schools in England at the time. In America, each university had their own version of the game. Harvard's was called Bloody Monday and got banned in 1860. The students responded to the ban by holding a funeral for a mock figure called Football Fightum. I guess university students have always been melodramatic and weird. But Harvard wasn't the only school to get their version of football banned. This was quite common. This isn't surprising, as the games were mostly based on the mob-style football from Europe, which was always getting banned for violence and brutality. But the game came back, as it always does, and in 1869 Rutgers and Princeton had the first intercollegiate football match. The rules were more similar to soccer than modern gridiron football. It did have a fair catch rule, though, similar to Australian football, where if you can catch the ball, you earn a free kick. They played 25 players a side, but in future games they cut it down to 20. In 1873, there was a conference to standardize the rules across all universities. Up until then, they always played by the home team rules, which gave the home team a pretty big advantage. The rules they settled on was much closer to soccer, as they based their game on European Association football rules. But Harvard refused to attend, and continued to play by their own rules. It's hard to find the exact rules for Harvard's homebrewed game. We know it was called Bloody Monday, and they rejected the European football because they wanted to keep the ability to pick up the ball and tackle people. Though they did have a soccer-style goal instead of an end zone. In 1874, they played McGill University, one game with Harvard's homebrewed rules, and one using rugby regulations, which was more popular in Canada. The students at Harvard really liked the game, and they adopted some of the regulations. One change was to remove the soccer-style goal and replace it with a try line or an end zone. They also reduced the amount of players to 11. You could kick or carry the ball, but when the ball carrier was tackled, play stopped. Over time, this style of football became widely popular among universities in America, replacing the soccer variant. Walter Camp, a student at Yale, is considered to be the father of American football, as he made many changes to the game that became popular. The biggest change being the introduction of the line of scrimmage. The line of scrimmage is an imaginary line where the ball is placed. Each team must stay on their side of the line before the ball is snapped to the quarterback. Camp made this rule to increase the scoring and make the game more exciting. It did not. The problem was the teams became very good at slowly moving the ball forward while keeping possession. The Princeton team at the time was known for being particularly good at this. This style of play slowed the game down to a crawl. Camp then proposed that a team must move the ball 5 yards within 3 downs or give up possession. Soon after, they legalized interference, or blocking players without the ball, something that was illegal and still is in rugby. At this point, the game looked a lot like modern football. The only thing missing is the forward throw. At this time, you still could only throw the ball laterally or back. The forward throw came into being because people were demanding to outlaw the game. Even the more modern version of football in 1905, 23 people were killed playing the game. The same year, President Theodore Roosevelt forced them to change the rules to reduce the number of injuries and deaths. The most important rule change was the forward pass. Other rules change was they forced a certain number of players to be on the line of scrimmage before the ball was hiked, and made it illegal to interlock arms with teammates or grab each other's belts, something done in rugby. This made dangerous tactics like the flying V, which was done when players would interlock arms with each other and run at the opposing team in a V formation, no longer legal. After 1906, there weren't many changes to the sport. Rules were refined, particularly the forward pass, but for the most part, the game stays the same.
And now he's going to roll. Now he's going to stop and set. Back at the 40, lets it fly to the end zone. Going to give his guys a chance. Going up, coming down. Does he come down with it?